Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Toffee Blues YouTube channel. You are joining us for this week's opposition preview, and I'm delighted to say I'm joined by Lewis from the Beesotted podcast previewing Everton versus Brentford at Goodison Park this weekend. And let's have it right. Brentford, one of the most informed teams in the league, I think. You know what I wouldn't give to be Brentford right now. It's unbelievable what they're doing over there. So massive thanks to Lewis for jumping on with us. So yeah, straight off the bat, Lewis, let's get straight into it, mate. It's fantastic what Brentford are doing. You know what? I look at that club and I'm so envious off the pitch, on the pitch. It just the togetherness, you know, that how everyone's just everything about it just seems so good at the minute from the outside looking in. And you know what? You are the first Brentford fan I've ever spoke to in my life, and I've got to say, if I could shake your hand over this, I would, because I'm telling you, what your club is doing is fantastic. I've got to say, just before we jump into things. So yeah, there you go. What are your thoughts on Brentford this season? Obviously, you came up last year. Great first season by all accounts. You stayed up quite comfortably in the end. Let's have it right. And this season, you just seem to have took it to that next level. You're 12 unbeaten in the league, and you're just going from strength to strength. So, what are your thoughts on how things have gone this year for the Bees?
Yeah, we're living the dream. I mean, it is remarkable, really, because we're, you know, as you know, we're a small club, really, more comfortable, and spent most of our lives in, you know, the third tier of English football. So yeah, I mean, last year, as you said, we ended up being quite comfortable. We got off to a flying start and then had a bit of a sticky patch, lost 6 or 7 on the bounce, and I think we're all fearing the worst. We managed to turn it around. So when this season started, we were really hoping to at least kind of maintain our position and see what we could do to avoid a relegation battle. And it's taken us all by surprise. This run that we're on is extraordinary, really. We've got. I think you're right in what you said about the club. You know, from top to bottom, it's well run, it's progressive, forward thinking. And we're seeing the benefits of that. I think what's interesting is that the improvement this season has not really been achieved through an influx of new players. It's the same core of players, to be honest, that kind of got us promoted. So I think that's a real tribute to the coaching staff, really, that they've managed to work with the players to improve them to the extent they had. You know, the only new recruit who's an established first team player now is Ben Mee, who joined us from Burnley on a free, and he's been a key part of our success this season. But yeah, I mean, we're just we're pinching ourselves, really, Calum. Can't quite believe what's happening, and I think we're kind of ready for the bubble to burst at any point, but week by week, we seem to still be kind of carving out the results. So, amazing, really.
So yeah, 12 games unbeaten, as we say. It's all fantastic at the moment for Brentford. I'd rather Brentford be coming into this game 12 games unbeaten than on a 12-game losing streak, because I think that would be quite nailed on as to how that would end up there. But you know what? You touched on it briefly there about the recruitment and how the core players which Brentford fans have came to know and love over the last couple of years, really, since your promotion, have remained very much the same. And, you know, recruitment is an area where Everton have just been woeful, really, has to be said, for a fair few years now. So what are your thoughts on just a bit more on the recruitment side of things? Is that success pretty much down to the fact how there hasn't had to be that much of a change in the playing squad? Or do you think Brentford are, you know, the way they do things, and they don't have to go out and buy all these players to try, as we've seen teams maybe try and do have came up and it hasn't quite worked for them, whereas Brentford, has that been the opposite, has it?
Yeah, I think the recruitment strategy has been to buy young. So we've gone out there for players, and we did spend, you know, for Brentford, you know, it's probably a record spend in the summer. But we were buying players who weren't necessarily kind of totally ready for the Premier League. So I think Lewis Keane-Potter is a good example of someone who, bought him from Hull for a reasonable transfer fee, but he's very much, he's got 10 minutes here, 5 minutes there. He's been a bench player most of the season. And, we're kind of, my take on it is that we bought him for the longer term. He's probably a bench warmer this season. In fact, he's just gone down injured today. So maybe not a very good example, but he's someone that we've bought for the future, really, both to do great things at Brentford, but also on the basis that his resale value is probably going to be more than we actually paid for him at the time. Some of the other new faces who've come in fit that bill as well. So someone called Kevin Schade joined us from a German club in the January window, and he's again just beginning to come off the bench. He set up our third goal in the derby game against Fulham on Monday night, and he's interesting. He's not the finished product by any means, but he's got serious pace, very direct player. So offering something slightly different to what we've got at the moment. But I think the fact that the bulk of the side have been playing with each other for 2 or 3 years now means that there's that real kind of sense of team. Players know their roles extremely well. They know what their fellow players are going to be doing. And they've kind of been on this journey together. And I think that's really helping us eke out results, particularly in really difficult games. That sense of togetherness and unity, if you like, that's been built by, kind of continuity, really.
And of course, at the top of that continuity has been the manager, Thomas Frank. And he's a man who's very, very, very likable from the outside looking in from me. There was talk of him coming to Everton when we sacked.
That's right, yeah.
Lampard, but I'm sure Thomas Frank has far too much sense than to do that. And of course, he recently signed a new contract as well, which is obviously great news for Brentford fans. I imagine he's very well thought of down your ends. So what are your thoughts on Thomas Frank? He came up. A lot of people haven't really heard of him that much. And he's just really, I think, from that Arsenal game on the first game of last season, I think you could see his reaction with the fans. I remember watching that game and his reaction with the fans and everything. Straight away, it was like, this guy's got a bit of personality about him. This guy's a character, and you can see the fans appreciate him so much. So what's it like to have a manager like Thomas Frank at the moment? I imagine he's so well thought of.
He's great. He's one of the first things you notice about him is how intelligent he is. He's intelligent, articulate. In some ways, not your average football manager, really. He was the assistant coach while Dean Smith was the number one, and when Smith moved on, obviously Thomas Frank stepped up, and he went on a terrible run. He didn't get a win for 9 or 10 fixtures, and credit to the club, they kind of held their nerve. They kind of knew or believed that he was going to turn things around, and he did. I think what's interesting about him is the fact, in the same way as the players have really grown, you can see him getting better as a manager each year. His in-game management now is like a real asset, whereas there were times, I would say, when we're in the Championship when the other manager was calling the shots once the teams were out there, So right. He's got much better at influencing games with substitutions. He's not afraid to change formation mid-game. So actually, within the 90 minutes, he's getting better and better. And he's just a really honest, likable, modest kind of fella, really, So yeah, there's a strong bond between him and the fans, and you can see how much the players want to play for him as well. So he really sets the tone, I think, and he's, the players really believe in him. He is now getting linked to most jobs where there's big clubs where there's a vacancy, like Everton. I saw some talk this morning, if Conte goes, would Thomas Frank be a candidate? And none of that was happening 2 years ago. He, like you said, he was kind of under the radar a bit. But now, because of Brentford kind of outperforming their status, if you like, people have wised up and that they've spotted that he's got something about him.
Yeah, exactly. You mentioned they're getting linked to all these jobs, and I think it's just testament to the job that he's done, isn't it? People are not going to talk about you if you're not a good manager, and what he's done at Brentford is just fantastic. And as I mentioned earlier in the stream, he's just gone from strength to strength. Unfortunately, I do have to talk about the the ugly side of this podcast. Unfortunately, because Everton. This is an Everton podcast, so from the outside looking in, it's always interesting to hear other Premier League clubs what they think of Everton's situation at the moment. No one hates Everton as much as Everton fans, and that has to be said. But so from you as a Brentford fan, what's your take on Everton this season? Obviously survived by the skin of our teeth last year. The jury's out on whether we'll be so lucky this year. We just don't know what's going to happen. We just do not know at the moment because it's as you know, it's so tight. Thankfully for yourself, Brentford are nowhere near this really interesting relegation battle that seems to be unfolding in the final third of the season. So what's your take on how Everton have performed this season from the outside looking in?
Well, I'm surprised how much you've struggled, because I saw a real upturn in performances towards the end of last season. A lot of it seemed to be kind of created by the fans. Going to Goodison was a real challenge for sides, and you just seem to be getting the performance levels up. And yet when this season started, it seemed as though actually that progress wasn't being sustained at all. You look really tight at the back because I thought the moves for Tarkowski and who's your other centre back?
Connor Cody.
Yes, I thought they were really smart acquisitions, actually, or loans, whatever they were, in front of Pickford, who's clearly a top class keeper. I thought that kind of defensive unit, if you like, was going to make Everton much more hard to beat than it's turned out to be the case this season. It looks again from the outside that you're struggling up front, particularly if Calum-Lewin's not playing. You got one of our old favourites up there, Neil Maupay.
They'll talk to me about him.
Yeah, but I know he never really pulled up that many trees at Brighton. It looks as though he's like second choice, really, doesn't it, at Everton? And
he's not good.
Yeah, so I think I'm slightly surprised that you've not been doing better this season. It is shaping up to be, like you said, a really quite an interesting relegation battle. There's from Palace down, it looks as though there's probably like good 7 or 8, maybe 9 sides battling it out there. No one's totally adrift. So it's probably the kind of situation where if you can get like 3 or 4 results on the bounce, you can kind of pull clear fairly easily, I'd have thought. It's just getting that confidence back into the side. I mean, the other thing is, I thought your manager change was a really smart one. I was never convinced by Frank Lampard's credentials really as a manager. He had it quite easy at Derby and Chelsea in lots of respects. But I thought Sean Dyche was a fantastic appointment. I mean, what he achieved over a long period of time at Burnley was like remarkable, really. It was the equivalent of, or if not even a greater achievement than Eddie Howe at Bournemouth, But to me, they were 2 of the brightest young managers in the country. And I was surprised that no one had come in for Dyche earlier than you guys did. But I would put money on him actually bringing success to the club. If you give him a chance, give him like a couple of years, even if it does, and I know you don't want to contemplate this, but even if it does involve a year in the Championship or something, he's got something about him, and he's got a track record. With a bit of money to spend, he can achieve great things for Everton, I think. But I think it's just about being patient, not kind of getting rid too soon. But he's a quality Premier League manager, I think.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, he's been brought in to do a job, and that job is to keep Everton in the Premier League, and hopefully he can do that. Yeah. But as we said, it's going to be very interesting. It's going to go down to the wire. Back to Brentford now. So who's been the standout for you this season, Lewis? Who's been the standout player of Brentford? Because I imagine there's been quite quite a few, to be honest. With the league table doesn't lie. There's a lot of top performers there. I feel so. For you, who's the standout for you?
It's really difficult. There are a few candidates. I would say probably our best player this season, and he has been for a couple of seasons now, is Christian Norgard. So defensive midfielder, really protects the back line superbly, good on the ball, calm, a real leader. So he is, he's possibly edges it over a couple of others. Ivan Toney, obviously everyone knows about him. He's a one-off really, but he's so potent in terms of his goal scoring that he's improved this season. Rico Henry, the left back, got to be worth a go for England. And the other player I'd single out is centre back Ethan Pinnock.
Yeah.
Again, I've got no idea why he has not been on on the shopping lists of some big clubs, because he gives our defence total aerial dominance. He's one of the few players I think who could probably hold his own against Calvert-Lewin in the air.
Yeah.
And again, real calm, deceptively quick. But he's been absolutely central to our success this season.
So who's the danger man then? Who's the danger? Is it Tony? In the box here, his goals. Is he going to be the danger man for yourself, or some other areas?
I think it is Tony, and I think his combination with Brian Mbeumo has been they've just clicked.
I've been really impressed with him, actually.
Yeah. So Mbeumo will do a lot of his running. He'll be there for flick-ons that Tony gets. Tony's the finisher, and Mbeumo's a bit erratic in front of goal. That's the part of his game that constantly lets him down. But his work rate, his pace, and his touch are absolutely, they're kind of higher end Premier League qualities. But he panics in front of goal, and it really lets his overall game down. But those two really play well. They've got a great understanding, and it allows the rest of the team to, defend when they need to, because actually those two can, they're really, really good outlet for the team, particularly if we're under the cosh.
Just on the flip side of that, who's the worst player? Where's the weakness in this Brentford side? If Everton are going to try and exploit any sort of area, where's the weak spot in this Brentford side for you?
Arguably, it's right back. We tend to flex the formation, so sometimes we'll play a 5, and when we do, it tends to be Roslev, young Scandinavian player who, to be fair, like others, has improved this season. He's capable of an off day now and again. And if we play a 4, it tends to be Aaron Hickey, a new signing he's just finding his feet, I think, at Brentford. But he's arguably one of the weaker players. And up front, you've got, we normally play a 3. And I've talked about Tony and Mbeumo. The third striker, Wisa normally is, good player, but not at the same level as the other two, really. I think the rest of the team pretty much kind of picks itself, but they're arguably two positions where we haven't got that absolute top quality.
And just finally, Lewis, I've got to ask, score predictions. What was your prediction? The thing is, when a team's on a 12 games winning run, is there a feeling amongst the fan base that it's might come to an end soon, or is there a feeling very much this can go on and on till maybe the end of the season or something? You don't know, because you've had some impressive results, really impressive results. But so what's the overall feeling in the camp coming into this game?
I think we know it's going to end soon. I think everyone is just collectively relieved that we didn't lose it against Fulham. That would have been very difficult to take. So it's going to come to an end. I think what's been interesting this season is we've done as well against the real, let's say the top 6 as we have against the other sides, So it could well be, against yourselves. We've got Southampton on Wednesday. We could come a cropper in either of those 2 games, I think. as far as the prediction goes, and I was talking about this last night on the Beesotted pod as well. I think it's going to be a really close game. I'm worried about you guys getting early goal and getting the crowd behind you, because that crowd is really significant. I remember going up there last season and, I've never heard noise like it, actually. It was absolutely like feverish, really. So I think if you get off to a good start, we could have a really difficult afternoon. But I think we'll just edge it, and I'll go 2-1.
Yeah, that's it. You talk about an early goal there, and normally I'd agree. I know we scored 2 at the weekend against Forest, but the biggest issue in this Everton side is that we don't score goals. We just do not score goals, and that's the problem. Yeah. And if Brentford get an early goal, if Brentford go 1 up, then the crowd start to turn. Goodison Park can be a great place, but Goodison Park can just as easily be a very, very toxic environment too, and that not easy for the players. So, like I said, if we fall behind, it'll be very difficult for us to go back to crawl back into the game. It'll be really difficult, but like I said, we need the points really, really badly. So it'll be an interesting one for myself. I can see it being a draw. I can see it being a 1-1 personally. I just think Brentford are just so superior to Everton at the moment in so many departments. I just can't really see us getting a win. We were comfortably beaten by Aston Villa in the end a couple of weeks ago, and I think Brentford are a far better side than Aston Villa. So it's going to be a really difficult game. But like I said, we're in a relegation dogfight. So whether we just pull it out the bag like a 1-0 like we saw against Leeds, and who knows. But yeah, there we go. Just before we wrap up, we do ask our guests, who do you think will win the Premier League this year? Is it going to be Arsenal, Manchester City, or someone else?
My prediction before the season started was Arsenal, and I'm going to stick with that. I just felt that they were a young side who just improved massively last season. And every time I think they're going to get overhauled by Man City, they pull out a result and City drop points. So, yeah, I think there's just about enough momentum there for them to stay up.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Lewis.
Yeah, stay on top, I mean.
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much, Lewis. Just before I let you go, one feature that we do at the end of the show for every opposition preview is, what's your favourite encounter with a former Brentford player or manager, or anyone famous sort of within football for yourself? Have you ever had an encounter with anyone like that, or anything that you can, any sort of thing you can share, perhaps? Anecdotes with any former Brentford player or anyone famous for that matter?
Yeah. Well, I mean, this isn't really a big story at all, but one of the things about Griffin Park, our old ground, was that after the game, you get the players, they'd walk out the ground and walk up they'd get the bus, and it's like so different from the Premier League.
Yeah.
And I was there with my youngest boy, and we're both season ticket holders, and his favourite player came out. So Romain Sawyers, who now plays, is at Cardiff at the moment, and what a lovely fella. He stopped, and we had photos with him and everything. And my son turned around and he had like Sawyers on his back of his Brentford shirt, And Romain Sawyers goes, "That is beautiful," and I thought, there's just something like magical about that moment. What a lovely fella he is. I've really kept an eye on his career, because he was a superb player who's not really kicked on. Actually, he went to West Brom, and he's now at and he's not always the first pick, which shocked me really, because by the end of his time at Brentford, he was absolutely superb. And I was so sad when he left. But seems to be getting back on a bit more form with Cardiff now. But hopefully he can stick with that. Yeah. Not an amazing.
That's all right, mate. No, that's fine. We're after our favourite opposition
it.
encounters with former Brentford players. That'll go down a nice one. So listen, Lewis, thanks very much for jumping on. Really appreciate your time speaking to us. Enjoy the game on Saturday. I hope I enjoy it a little bit more, but the chances of that, based on what I've seen so far, I wouldn't bet on that too much. But listen, thanks so much for jumping on.
Well, thanks for having me, Calum.
Beesotted podcast, if you haven't already done so as well.
Good luck the rest of the season, mate.
As well. So thank you for jumping on, Lewis, and hopefully we shall speak to you again very soon. Cheers, mate.
Great. Good luck. Cheers.